The bolt slides shut with a sharp, final click. A rush of cold air hits her face, the kind that smells faintly of natron and burned-out incense, stale and heavy with age. Somewhere around 1100 BCE, deep inside the sprawling Karnak temple complex. Back then, what the Egyptian priests did to the temple virgins wasn't just cruel, it was deliberate erasure, a kind of punishment that made death seem merciful. These women, sworn to serve the gods, simply vanished from the world outside those sacred walls. Each carried the shen ring, a stone carving of a coiled rope meant to represent eternity. But over time, the priests twisted that symbol. It no longer stood for eternal life. It became a mark of captivity, a reminder that eternity could also mean never being free. And so the question remains, why did these women, once seen as vessels of divine power, disappear so suddenly from history? What purpose did those sealed chambers serve, the ones buried beneath the temple floors? The holiest place in Egypt had quietly turned into the perfect prison. If you're into these kinds of dark historical tales, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment to tell me where you're listening from. Alright, let's get back to the story. The procession doesn't end at the main altar. It moves past the sanctuary, beyond the hall of offerings, and stops before a thin opening in the basalt wall. A slit hidden behind a tapestry painted with the journey to the afterlife. The women aren't guided gently. They're herded, one after another. The deeper they go, the colder and quieter it becomes. The sounds of Memphis, the murmur of the Nile, gone. What's left is only the soft scrape of sandals on polished stone and the hollow echo of their own hymns bouncing off the walls. Their family names are no longer spoken. They are now called Heimatnetcher, servants of the god. Their fine linen garments are taken away, replaced with rough, uniform shifts. Their sacred titles, the symbols of who they once were, are stripped clean. Even the shen ring, that proud emblem of divine favor, is replaced. Each woman receives a new amulet, small, cold, and carved from dark diorite, shaped again like the eternal loop. But this isn't a token of faith. It's a shackle. Their new world consists of a maze of narrow rooms buried beneath the temple's foundations. Spaces so hidden they barely appear in architectural records. The priests call it the conduit, the house of the underworld, brought to life on earth. By daylight, the women work, weaving fine linens for the god's statue, grinding minerals into the brilliant blue ink used for sacred texts. By night, they're locked inside identical stone cells, bare as tombs. Their meals come twice a day, flatbread, dates, and water drawn from the temple's own well. It's a routine so repetitive it wears away thought itself, designed to erase the person and leave behind only the ritual. But submission isn't total. Among them, one woman, her name already slipping into the cracks of memory, keeps count. Each evening, she presses her fingernail into the mortar between the stones and makes a single mark, a quiet act of defiance against eternity. She learns the rhythm of the guards by the sound of their staffs tapping against stone, each shift with its own steady beat. She memorizes it all without looking up. One night, she pinches a thread of wax from the ritual lamp, rolls it into a small bead, and hides it in her fist. She isn't planning an escape. The walls are thick as mountains. She isn't dreaming of freedom, only of remembering. Why keep such careful records? She wonders, when no one will ever read them. Yet still she does. Then comes what they call mercy. The high priest arrives in person. Calm, collected, his face set in a cold, sorrowful mask. His tone is soft, almost fatherly, but there's no warmth in it. He speaks of Egypt's decay, weak pharaohs, foreign hands, faith corrupted. Their families, he says, have forgotten the gods. These women have been brought here, into the sacred heart of Karnak, to preserve their purity from a world unworthy of it. They are not captives, he insists. They are treasures. And treasures belong in the dark, locked safely away. The price of divine protection is simple. Their entire lives. Chosen to be holy, they are kept to be silent. When he returns again, the compassion is gone. His expression is dry and distant, the look of a man maintaining a resource. The diorite shen rings rest heavy against their rough garments, cold as iron. This time he doesn't speak of mercy, but of balance. The world outside, he says, is unraveling. The gods are restless, the sands advancing. Even the rituals that hold the desert at bay are weakening. The temple needs more. Their existence isn't symbolic, it's functional. Their purity feeds the gods, keeps the statues alive, powers the sacred machinery of faith. They are the hidden batteries of Karnak. And at last, the truth is spoken plainly. This isn't a test of belief. It's a demand for surrender. Give your strength willingly, he tells them. Pray not to the god, but to the rites themselves. Become the source we need, and your comforts will be restored. Fine linen, sweet wine, ripe fruit. He pauses, scanning their still faces. But if you refuse, he says quietly, the god will take it anyway, and when that happens, the vessel will be left empty. It isn't a threat. It's theology as control. And then comes silence. Thick, heavy, endless. Then, the woman who's been marking the walls finally speaks. Her voice cracks like dry papyrus. Rough, unsure, barely used. We serve the god, she says quietly. Not the priests. The reaction is swift, but it isn't loud. The priests don't raise their rods or shout. They punish through absence. At first, it's subtle, the air itself feels emptier. The gentle pressure that always lingered in the halls disappears. Then come the small deprivations. No more brief visits, no soothing words, no illusion of care. Their rations shrink. The bread hardens, the dates grow fewer. The ritual lamps that once burned for a few trembling hours each night are snuffed out earlier and earlier, until half their lives are swallowed by darkness. Their looms are taken away, leaving unfinished linens to gather dust in the corners. With no work, no sound, no rhythm, all that remains is the weight of the stone itself. Then comes the final cruelty, silence. Even the guards are forbidden to speak. They slide food through narrow slots in the doors and vanish again. Now the women are truly alone, entombed in the cold, surrounded by black walls and the hollow sound of their own breathing. Far above, the faint echo of temple chants filters down like a memory of life. This was the reason. It was never about holiness. It was about control. The priesthood, desperate and fading in the dying light of the 20th dynasty, was losing its grip. The old miracles no longer impressed the people. The gods had grown silent, and with them, the priest's authority was slipping away. So they found a new kind of offering. The gods' wives, the consecrated virgins, once held immense influence in both faith and ceremony. Now they were rebranded as liabilities and solutions all at once. They weren't hidden to protect their sanctity. They were confined to extract it. They weren't sacrifices, they were fuel. That was the true cost of their devotion. Their so-called sacred duty had become a resource, something the priesthood could collect, ration, and drain as needed, all to preserve their own power. But in their arrogance, the priests made a fatal mistake. They thought by taking away the world, they would shatter these women. Instead, they stripped them down to their essence. The silence they imposed became a shared vow. Monotony hardened into discipline. Stillness became strength. In the blackness, their senses sharpened. They could smell a shift in incense long before it reached them. They could feel the faint tremor of footsteps in the floors above before the priests appeared. The silence, meant to weaken them, turned into armor. Stripped of everything human, the women found only the God left to them. But he was not in the hollow words of the priests or their empty rites. He was in the stone itself. The prison had not broken them. It had reforged them into something else. Years passed in the cold basalt womb. The women grew pale and thin, but their eyes burned brighter than ever. The high priest has been dead for years now. Another took his place, a man who never bothers to come down here. The rituals above have changed hands, their meanings diluted by repetition. Even the guards are different now, young, bored, and careless. They've long forgotten why the women are kept below. To them, the prisoners are nothing more than a forgotten entry in the temple's endless inventory. listed somewhere between the sacks of grain and the jars of incense. The woman who once carved the walls is old now. Her fingernails are split and worn to nothing. The mortar she marked is filled with shallow scars, every space used. Her tiny sphere of wax has hardened into a gray pebble, meaningless except to her. One night, in the thickest silence of the long hours, she stays awake. She moves her hands along the cold blocks of her cell, tracing every groove she's memorized over the years. Near the floor, her fingertips stop. One stone feels different. The mortar there is softer, gritty, mixed with sand instead of lime. She begins to pick at it with a jagged piece of pottery left from a meal. Night after night, she works in silence, scraping, chipping, breathing slow to mask the sound. On the third night, the stone shifts. Behind it isn't freedom, but a hollow, a narrow, black space no wider than her arm. Still, she reaches inside. Her fingers brush against something smooth, fragile, not stone. Carefully, she pulls it free. It's a shen ring, but unlike the dark, heavy diorite ones the priests gave them. This one is made of pale blue faience. Its glaze cracked and faded with time. It's older than any of them. Someone had been here before. Someone else had hidden, and someone else had tried to escape. She sits back against the wall, holding the broken amulet in her lap. Then she reaches for her own hardened sphere of wax and places it beside the cracked ring. There are no tears, no prayers. She simply opens her palm and holds the two relics together, one born of defiance, the other of memory. When morning comes and a thin beam of light slips through the food slot, she rises. Without a word, she shows the others what she's found. No one speaks. They don't need to. Each woman steps forward and touches the broken ring, one after another. It's not a ritual they were taught, but a ritual born from knowing. They are not the first. They would not be the last. This hidden history, like their names, was meant to vanish. And yet, somehow, it lingered. Why hold onto the very symbol that bound them? The official temple records from that era tell nothing. Every papyrus is immaculate. The ledgers are balanced. The lists of handmade, the gods' wives, simply stop, as though the sacred order had quietly ceased to exist. But history doesn't live only on paper. It endures in stone. In 1907, archaeologists digging through the massive Karnak cache uncovered a sealed chamber. Not a tomb, not a shrine, just a blocked-off service room filled with dry rubble. Inside, they found no treasure, no gold, no jewels, no statues of the gods. What they did find was stranger. Fragments of coarse linen, dozens of date pits, and over 40 shen rings. But these weren't the temple's official diorite rings. These were small, rough, and handmade, carved from wood splinters, bits of soapstone, even hardened Nile clay mixed with chaff. And that was the truth buried beneath centuries of silence. The priests had handed these women a symbol of captivity. The women, in turn, remade it as proof of endurance. In the endless dark, they had turned their prison into a secret workshop, crafting their own versions of the eternal ring from scraps and dust. Each one was a declaration, a heartbeat, a record. They weren't just passing the time. They were leaving testimony. The priests had sought to drain them, to use their devotion as fuel and discard the husks that remained. But the women kept their own ledgers, carved in silence. They weren't just surviving. They were documenting their existence the only way they could. The official records of Karnak are precise to the last grain of barley. They note every jar of oil, every measure of incense, every sacred animal. But in the lines where the handmade should be listed, the papyrus goes blank. The entries end abruptly around 1100 BCE. No deaths, no transfers, no names. The scribes, acting under orders, simply stopped writing. Their names weren't erased, they were never recorded. Centuries later, when Greek historians walked through the ruins and asked about the old stories, the gods' wives who once held divine power, the priests smiled politely. They spoke of allegories and purity, of symbolic brides who embodied the land's holiness. They turned living women into metaphors. The rumors of their confinement were waved off as superstition, a mistake of translation. The truth had been plastered over and painted anew, made clean for history's sake. Those crude shen rings, found buried in the rubble, were logged by the excavators as minor relics, votive offerings, they called them, and packed away in boxes. The quiet testament of dozens of vanished lives reduced to a line in a catalog. It began with the sound of a bolt sliding shut, a single final click. At first, it was the sound of a door closing on the living. In the end, it was the sound of a scribe's wooden case snapping shut, sealing the last page of their story. It was the sound of history being buried, not by sand, but by silence. What the priests did wasn't execution. It was something colder, a slow, clerical kind of death. The theft of a name, the theft of memory, the theft of a place in the world. So if you've listened this far, subscribe, leave a like, and ring the bell. Because the stone keeps what the papyrus forgets.